Alright guys, welcome to our baked lighting tutorial in Unity. So we are finally going to start creating some interesting scenes using area lights and mesh lights, baking these texture maps, these light maps into our scene, and we're going to get into doing some post-processing as well, which is going to be really fun because we get to add some really cool effects to our game. So let's go ahead and dive right in. The very first thing that I want you guys to do is go up to the Windows tab, click on Window, and let's open up our lighting panel. So we're going to go to Rendering and then Lighting. So you can also get to this by hitting Control 9. And what you should see is a lighting panel just like this. All right, so let me reset to default settings here just to make sure. So let me reset to default settings here just to make sure that we are on the same page. And right out the gate, these are the settings that you should see for our light maps in our scene. So we're not going to make any changes at the moment. However, we are going to be coming back to this and making a handful of changes. So here we'll be able to see the actual light maps that get generated once we start making some changes here. But the very first thing that I want to do is go into my assets folder, and I want to make a new material that is going to have an emissive glow to it. So I'm going to right click, go to create material, and I'm just going to call this glow. And in the inspector, I'm going to click on the base, or I'm sorry, not the base map. I'm going to go over to this emissions tab here, enable emission, and I'm going to change the color of this emission. We're going to make it like a bright alien light green, and I'm going to go ahead and bump up the intensity by 2. So you're not... So you're not able to see the window that I have open at the moment, but once you click on this HDR color, a little color wheel will show up. Select the color that you want. I'm going with a green. And then at the bottom of it, you'll be able to adjust the intensity. I'm going to increase it by 2. And then this is what we'll use for this object that I'm going to place here in the scene. We're going to add a glow effect to an object here, and then we're going to have an area light emitting a light down this way. So that's our plan for our scene here. So I have my material created. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and let's add the mesh. So I'm going to utilize the search bar here. I highly recommend you getting used to using this, because if you know something exists in your assets and you just want to quickly find it, you can just type it right into the search bar. So I know we have a computer mesh that I can use, so I'm just going to drag this in. I'm going to hit the F key to focus in on it, and I'm just going to scale this up and rotate it right about there. I think that looks good. Bring it up to that point. So what I'm going to do is apply 2 materials to this. So I'm going to go to Assets, My Materials, and I'm going to apply the computer material that I made, which is just a gray one, to the body of the computer, and then I'm going to attach the glow material to the screen specifically. So you can already see that we're getting some behavior of this emissive in our scene already, which is fantastic. But we are going to bake a light map onto this so that this light can actually react with the environment around it. Let's go to this material, and we are going to make sure I have this set correctly. Mission global illumination we want set to baked, which is perfect. All right. So next we're going to go ahead and place our area light. So I'm going to right click in our hierarchy, go to light and area light. It's going to place one right in the scene, but we're not going to see anything happen because we haven't baked any of our lights yet, and area lights can only be baked into a scene. So I'm just going to position this right around here. There we go. I'm going to change some settings here. I'm going to change it to a disk, and we'll keep the radius right about there. I think that's fine. And then we will adjust these settings once we actually start baking some lights into this. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's open up our lighting tab here. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, before we do that, we need to make sure that everything in our scene that isn't moving is set to being a static object, because that is how Unity is going to determine what to calculate the lighting effects to. So what I've done in this scene, I placed all of these rocks and I made a blank parent object for them. If you want to do something similar, all you have to do is, like, let's say you have a bunch of rocks in your scene. Select all of the rocks, and then you'll right click on it and you'll see an option in that drop down for create empty parent. You select that and it will create a parent object for all of those rocks that you can then label. So what we need to do is assign this static to everything that isn't moving. So literally our ground, rocks, light pole, trash can, bench, everything that's in this scene that doesn't move needs to be set as static. So let's go ahead and do that. So for the rocks, for example, I can select the parent object and go into the inspector. And this little checkbox here, static, I want to turn on. You're going to get a notification that says, asking you if you want to apply static to all the children of this parent object. You want to select yes. So let's go down to the computer. I want to make sure that is set to static as well. And make sure that this light post is set to static, which it is. Perfect. Static. I need to set the trash can to static. There we go. Computer and area light. Perfect. So we have our area light placed. The settings aren't changed whatsoever, but let's go into the lighting tab and let's start baking our lights. So real-time lighting, we want to leave off, real-time global illumination, because we are just going to be baking our lights. And for our light map settings, this is what we want. We want to change to progressive GPU preview, and progressive updates we want turned on, important sampling on. We're going to leave all of these as defaults. Down here we're going to start making some changes. So basically with the science behind lighting, right, is this can be relatively intensive on the computer. So the ideology is that you start off with a lower resolution light map for all the changes that you're going to make, and when your game is done and you're ready to publish, you are going to crank those settings up to what you want them to be for the final render of your light maps. So to start off, we want to make sure that we're doing, you're keeping things on the lower quality side so that we can make changes quickly. The reason for that is because for those of you that are familiar with 3D modeling software or have taken the 3D modeling class, is the Arnold renderer. So in the Arnold renderer in Maya, for example, you render a scene and you see all those like pixelated, dots show up on the screen as it's filling in all of that light data in your scene until it eventually gets to a final render. Now, that's essentially the same thing that's happening here in Unity. We have a scene that needs to be rendered. The lighting needs to be calculated and rendered so that a light map can be placed on top of all the objects in the scene. And we'll see what that looks like here in just a second. So in order to save us on rendering time, because every time we make a change in the scene, it's going to have to re-render those lights, we're going to tone down the resolution of this light map. So I'm going to change this from 40 to 20. Padding, we'll keep it 2. For max light map size, we're going to tone that down to 512. Light map compression, we're going to switch to normal quality. We're going to turn on ambient occlusion and just leave it at the default settings. Ambient occlusion is really nice because it specifies whether to, ambient occlusion is really nice because it simulates the soft shadows that happen in like the cracks and crevices of objects when light is reflected onto them. So it just adds a little extra bump of realism, which is nice. So we're going to turn that on, and we'll leave all these settings as default. And then once we get down here to the bottom, we are going to click on Auto Generate. And what you're going to see is Unity is going to start rendering the light maps for this scene. And you can see that here we are getting feedback about what our light map is. So we have 2 directional light maps, and the size of our light maps is 1.3 megabytes. So if we look at our baked light maps, you can see that these are the physical light maps that are being placed on top of our, our objects in our scene. So if I open preview, you can actually see where that computer light is. Now we can't see the area light because it's not intense enough. So we're going to go to the inspector. We're going to select that area light, and we're going to manipulate the settings. And you're going to see as I manipulate the settings, Unity is going to automatically start rendering that light map again. So intensity, I'm going to crank up to 20. And you can see that it's already starting to fill in that space. I'm going to change the color of this to like a warm hue. There we go. We can see it bouncing off of the ground there. And we'll actually crank this up to 40, I think. Yeah, I like that a lot more. Perfect. So it's processing. We're seeing how the light is being calculated in the scene. Which is great. And then now if we go back to our lighting and bake light maps, we can see the behavior of this light in the scene. I click open preview, and there you go. So really, really interesting how this works. And we can see it, bouncing off of this material here, really starting to get a nice effect here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and we can take a look at our environment with the lights on. I'm just going to run over here. So I just noticed I created a duplicate of this tree, and I think that's why it is repeating the color of what it's repeating the color that's reflecting off of this tree over here because of this light. So that's something I can fix later. But yeah, we have some nice lights in our scene, and we can take this a little bit further. We can add some post-processing effects to this scene, which is really, really cool, and also super fun to do. So the way we do that is actually really, really easy. So here in our hierarchy, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to go down to volume, and I'm going to create a global volume, which I'm just going to call post-processing. So with that selected, mode is set to global, profile is none. We are going to add a component. Oh wait. Create a new volume profile. And we're going to add an override, and we can see post-processing right here. So as we're making some changes, let's go ahead, and film grain is going to be an easy one to see. So let's start with that one. It's going to enable everything, and I'm going to crank up the intensity, and you can see that it's adding this film grain effect to my camera, which is perfect. You can also go into game view and see these changes as well. So if you want a really intense film grain, we can get that effect here. Let's say I just want, a minor one. I'm going to add another one. Let's add a bloom so we can really get some distinct glowing effects in our scene. So I'm going to turn all this on. And let's start messing with some settings. There we go. So to create more of a glow off of all this stuff, so we're like about right there. We can control the intensity. I want it to scatter a bit. not that much, so I'll put it to right about there. Perfect. And let's move this area light a little bit. Put it right there. Let's see what else we can add. So go to our post-processing layer. We're going to add an override post-processing, and let's do a few different things. Let's add, so we can make color adjustments to our scene. So let's say I want to increase the contrast significantly or reduce it. I can do so. Let's bump up the contrast just a little bit, and we can shift the hue of it as well. But we'll just leave that at 7. And we can also change the exposure of the scene as well, which is really cool. We'll add another one. Last one I'm going to add for now is some depth of field. Depth of field is really fun. We're going to do a Gaussian depth of field, and essentially it's just going to create some nice blur. So I'll go to game view for that one. So you can see things at a distance are going to get blurred out. So I'm going to say anything past kind of like where this bench is, I'm going to make it a little bit blurry. So let's extend that out a little bit. There we go. And let's go ahead and play our game with these changes. Really quickly though, I am going to remove this tree. That is a duplicate of the other tree. There we go. Instead of duplicating it, I just copied and pasted it, and that fixes that issue. All right, now we're good to go. Let's hit play. So you can see now we got a nice depth of field effect. Things are blurry in the distance, and it's just really adding to, you know, the aesthetic feel of our game, which is just phenomenal. Just with a few post-processing effects, you can really start to get a really great effect going. So in your scene, start feeling free to add these emissive lights using materials, and you can also start adding some area lights in your scene as well. And we will continue to build off of what we're learning here just to create some interesting and nice environments in our scene.